Okay. Hey, if you can hear us, please let us know where you are listening to us from. And if you're watching or recording, welcome to Noble Warrior Live. My name is CK Lin. This is a place where visionaries get to talk about what it takes to create a life, a career, a purpose, a meaning. And we're going to talk about mindset. We're going to talk about mental models. We're going to talk about actionable tactics so that you can go out and create your own hero's journey. And by the way, if you have any friends who could use a little bit more direction or navigating their own hero's journey, please go ahead and share it on your social media, share it with them, so then that way they can benefit from your discovery, okay? My next guest, he's a serial entrepreneur. He's founded Clearview, sold to Apple. He's founded eShop and sold to Microsoft. He's ran MSN.com back in the late 90s. He's now the CEO and co-founder of Oji Lab. Please welcome Matt Kursh.
Thanks, CK. Fun to be here.
Thank you so much for being here, Matt. What a day today. Martin Luther King Jr. And as someone who, what a timely discussion that we're about to have, and sharing these type of self-awareness, soft skills in the workplace, and the ramification of that. I'm curious to know, did today bring a special meaning and significance for you around the work that you do?
Well, you know, somebody on the news this morning was saying, I think it was a Martin Luther King quote, that you can't address hate with hate. You have to address hate with love, which I think is a very important concept at this particular moment of U.S. history on the Monday before the inauguration, with everything that's going on. So it is an emotional kind of minefield right now in our country and really the world. So it's an amazing time.
Yeah. So we're going to talk about the bigger ramification, the larger ripple effects of the work that you do. But I want to zoom in real quick on your experience as a two-time, founder who's later on sold to Microsoft and Apple. It's a dream come true for a lot of entrepreneurs who want to sell companies. So knowing what you know now, having gone through that journey, if you can advise younger Matt, younger CK, other entrepreneurs who have that as their goal, what would you say to them, knowing what you know now?
You know, my answer is paradoxical, which is it's not a very good goal. You know, when just before we went live right now, you asked me what I hoped to have happen today, and I said to connect with you. And I learned, I have a neighbor, Anna Halprin, who's 100 years old, who's a very famous dancer, known all over the world. And when she was younger, like 94, she said to me once, you know, you have to learn to hold your goals loosely. And, you know, particularly amongst the overachievers like us, and like probably most people watching this who have a lot of goals, I think sometimes the goals become the obstacles. So I didn't have a goal of selling to Apple or to selling to anyone. Now, when I started our first company, which was in the mid 80s, that wasn't even an idea. You just started a company to see if you could make things that people would buy. And similarly, when I started my second company, sure, I knew I could sell a company because I'd already sold one. But yeah, I wasn't holding out like, how can we navigate this so that we could sell to Microsoft or to another big company? It's more just that every day you come in and you have some loose long-term goals. Like, I want to make this, I want to serve more people. I want to build a bigger, more stable business that has more momentum, that is more self-sustaining. But I think I held my goals pretty loosely. And I think as I've gotten older, with Anna Halprin and other people's coaching, I've learned to do that even more. You know, like I said when we started, let's ride the wave here. Let's surf the wave. You can't make the wave. You can't make the wave doesn't appear because you want it to. The wave appears because it does. Your choice is how you're going to ride it.
Mm, mm. Well, I mean, that's so I'm gonna play the role of and the opposition.
Yeah.
For those, so there, I know there are like VC firms that's called a wave maker, right? So I'm curious to know your perspective. So personally, I agree with you 100%. But for those that believe that, hey, I gotta have an exit strategy, I gotta, my sovereign wishes that
Yeah.
will be done type of, like, I am the captain of my soul, I'm the master of my fate kind of person. What would you say to them?
I think it's kind of there's kind of this yin and yang. You have to hold these conflicting ideas. I think you need to have an exit possibilities, right? Like you need to have some grounded, rational ideas for how you're going to make money for your investors and your shareholders, including your partners and co-founders and employees. So you need to have options. And for everything I just said, like when I work on our business, I spreadsheet the hell out of the thing. Like I really think through scenarios, but the key is I know that it's all in my head and I can't make that Excel spreadsheet happen. I often tell the story of pitching eShop to one of my investors in the mid 90s. And I think I forgot my slides. This was back when slides were on transparencies. I think I forgot them or I didn't think I needed them. And so he asked what our financial model was, but I knew it. I had done it so many times. I went to the whiteboard and I wrote it all out. And when I was all done, he said, so tell me, that's really interesting. Do you believe in it? Do you think that's going to happen? And I said, absolutely not. I can defend each number, but it's not going to happen. He said, great. That's what I wanted to know. Like he knew that was the reality, and he was comforted to know that I also knew it wasn't a reality. So I have this term I invented after years of therapy that it's the word optionful. So like, the notion of being hopeful, and optionful is to have the sense in life that you have options, that there's not just one way that things can work out, but both because of the universe and because of your resourcefulness and openness, that there are options. And I think if you can cultivate that optionfulness, that it helps you counteract this impulse of wanting to feel like I need to know exactly what's going to happen, or I'm going to control and make sure it works out the way I want it to work out. And the good news is, the reality is that desire to want to control how it's going to work out is completely futile. You can't control how it works out. So at least if you're optionful, you can feel okay. You're like, I'm a cat that will land on its feet. I just need to stay open.
Yeah. Again, personally, 100% agree with you all the way.
Cool.
Because as much as I know about something, the more I learn about life or any kind of domain in general, the more I learn, the more I know that I don't know much of anything, honestly, right? However, I'm curious to know, maybe that's already there. We don't need to call it out. So then you see people who just speak in absolute terms. Absolutely, yes.
Yeah.
Absolutely no. And so for me, when I hear people say that, in my mind, I discount them automatically, because to me, that just shows sign of, immaturity or hubris or arrogance, whichever way you call it. But I'm curious to know, from your perspective, to me, that moment when you said to your investor, absolutely not, that shows a lot of faith in yourself and in him. Yeah. Right? That he's going to be able to have the maturity to receive what you share with them. So I'm curious, how would you advise other founders who have these type of major decisions? Should they err on the side of being a little bit more confident and a little bit more certain than perhaps they really feel, or just, hey, here's the percentage of probabilistic outcome that's going to be?
Well, I heard this quote yesterday on one of the Sunday news shows. I think they were talking about Dorothy Day, who I think was a social activist. Somebody said of her, she acted like the truth was true. And, I think you have to act like the truth is true. So if you're talking to an investor or a partner or a customer, and they want, what they want you to do is talk with a certainty that's not real, I think you should disconnect from that individual, because nothing good is going to come from somebody who feels like reality can be controlled, the future is knowable. It's just, act like the truth is true. That's just not real. You're not setting yourself up for success. Even if it's like, I've got, it's this customer and they just need to hear this certainty. If they want it, you can't give it. And to pretend that you can to get the sale isn't going to work out. So I don't know if that's what you were asking, but
yeah,
I think you just, compromising on that view of reality isn't going to get you anywhere.
Yeah. I mean, I'm with you 100%. Well, especially with the talking heads that we see on the news today, they're pretty much all, well, the nature of news cycles, they need to speak in absolute terms.
Yeah.
They can't just, say, hey, well, yes, but there's some uncertainty. In my mind, they have to basically speak from a very reductionist point of view rather than the more depth that we're talking about here.
Yeah, I mean, my wife was quoting a well-known political pundit who I respect a lot, who was making some opinion known about what was going to happen with Donald Trump. And it was like, no one knows. We're in completely new territory here. I'm not making any comment here about Donald Trump. I'm just saying this is a highly chaotic, unpredictable situation. And so, like, it's funny, like sometimes you watch the news shows, and if you just filtered out all the speculation, like 80% of the show would be gone. But it is speculation. And so it's the same in business. You launch a product, you don't know what your customer thinks about it. I have this saying that every failed product is preceded by a successful focus group, right? Like, people do focus groups and they're like, they loved it. Yeah, they loved it. You had a focus group.
The net promotion score is
right
9, 10. Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, we don't know these things. We can't predict what's going to happen. So, I use the word hubris. I mean, just be humble. We don't know. I mean,
Yeah.
I don't think my family would say I'm humble, but I do try to be humble about what I could really know.
So if you look at your own professional trajectory, the companies that you founded, from Clearview to eShop to now Oji Lab. By the way, what does Oji mean?
Oji is the Italian word for today.
I see.
In Italian, it's spelled O-G-G-I.
I see.
Which we wouldn't pronounce well in America, so we use Oji just as a concept of being present. What can we do today to improve our lives? So Oji Life Lab, that's where the name comes from.
Yeah, I like it. It's fun to say, OG.
Good. Yeah.
Yeah. So if you look at, do you feel like that's the natural evolution of an entrepreneur, from focusing more on the consumer goods to now a little bit more at the higher level of Maslow's hierarchy of needs, or that's completely not true? Just, look at, like, what's your the internal matrix to make this decision to say, hey, I want to focus on this, and not this?
Yeah, that's really interesting. I mean, I think there's two completely separate answers to that, and I'll try to do them both quickly. I mean, for me personally, um, the thing that drives me with these business ideas is just the concept, the project, the the kind of creative effort of, wow, wouldn't it be cool if we had X? And some people start businesses because they think it's a good way to make money, and some people start businesses because they like the intellectual challenge. There's a number of ways that I see people doing it, but for me, it's more like a creative project. So I just had a bunch of different ideas, and fortunately found folks who had compatible ideas and passions, and we went off and did it together. So I don't know about why I did the exact sequence that I did do. That said, I do think there's kind of a developmental psychology aspect to what this is about. I mean, when I see young entrepreneurs, you're doing your first business, it's just like business is exciting, you get business cards and you incorporate and you get an office and, you get yourself set up on some servers and you hire people, like everything's new. And it's kind of like, sometimes you look at the underlying business, you're like, wow, you're helping people get custom made dog leashes made out of recycled plastic from the Amazon. I mean, it's like, it's not really important, but you don't care because it's your first time through. So I do think that once you've done it enough times, it really comes down to the idea. It's like starting a business isn't per se exciting anymore. What's exciting is working with people on something that you think is an important mission, which certainly is the case with what I'm doing. So I do think there is that kind of progression, that your third time through, your fourth time through, you have different values.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. Similar type of topic, because I was asking a thought leader, his job is professional writers, and then we were asking him questions about titling and thumbnails and very nuanced, very detailed questions, and he's like, ultimately he doesn't care. Because actually I remember what the question was: Facebook groups, how many groups, the titles, and so on and so on. It's like, ultimately he doesn't care. It's just a means to an end. So I asked him the question of how did he develop this non-attachment to his? Well, he said, just have a lot of Facebook groups. So similar concept. Once you have a lot of companies, then the little details, the mechanistic type of it becomes irrelevant. It's about the core idea. What is you going after?
Yeah, a guy I worked with at Microsoft had this line that I always loved. He said it's all about the curricula, which was his way of saying, like, everything he did was about what was he learning. So he went, at Microsoft, he went amongst a lot of different jobs, and sometimes they were up the hierarchy and sometimes they were down in the hierarchy, and he just didn't care. He was really focused on what he was learning. And I think for most people, you could generalize and say learning is how are you growing? And, when you're doing your first business, you're growing in different ways than when you're doing your third business. Just like the first time you travel overseas, you're getting different things out of it and growing in different ways than the 10th time you've gone overseas. So it's a different slice.
Yeah, I have a feeling that this is your path. You enjoy the creating a business, growing a business, the frustration of running a business. Would that be an accurate description?
Yeah, I mean, I could do without the frustration. If you have some ideas, that would be great. But yeah, I love making things, and I love doing it with people that who I really respect and admire and can learn from, and that whole kind of team sport aspect is so fun to me. And I just think the way my brain works is that it churns out ideas, and I think this is true for most people. And for me, there's just something incredibly rewarding about conceiving of a thing,
Mm.
and making it happen. And this is where holding goals loosely is really important, because you conceive of a thing and it's not the right thing, right? It's not actually what humans want. It's your guess at what humans want. And then humans start telling you what they like and what they don't like. And you get to see it evolve and grow. It's just enormously, gratifying to see that happen.
Yeah, thanks for that. Actually, so as a side question for you, we're still at the beginning of 2021.
Yeah.
What's your perception? What's your relationship with goal setting these days?
Well, I mean, I think it ties into what we talked about. Like, me and the team we have a, financial forecast for what we want the business to be and what kind
Sorry, let me qualify that a bit. Personal goals rather than
goals. Yeah. So I hear what you're saying. I mean, within the business sense, I have goals. Within my personal goals, I don't know that I have any other goals except to keep making my marriage better, to keep trying to be a better parent. And, I think I mentioned you, Anna Halpern, again. She said to me at one point, she's like, people focus too much on goals. You should focus more on process. Which, you and I think, discussed it. It's like, if you're a person like you or me, it's like, what are you talking about? How could you be too focused on goals? But I really took it to heart. And so, I want to be a better friend. I want to be a better son. I want to be a better brother. I want to be better at those things. And it's a process. I don't know that I'd be better off if I said, I have a goal for, each of these areas. I don't really. So yeah, I mean, and part of that's, to be clear, I mean, I think there's a lens that everything I say should be filtered through, which is, I'm 56 years old. I'm at a different point in my life. I'm not, a single person, 5 years out of college, kind of at the very beginning of their life, not sure which of 1,000 directions it might go in. I'm in a different place.
Well, I guess yes, I agree 100%, right? There's a development cycle, and the kind of goals that one may want to have. And you may or may not give the same advice to your kids, right?
Right, exactly.
But I am curious, because you do have the experience and the wisdom now, and you could gift them that gem earlier as opposed to later after they realize themselves. I don't know. I'm just curious to know kind of like how you think about it and how you wanted to share it and teach it to your kids.
Yeah, I mean, we can categorically say my kids don't want to learn anything from me. They hear enough of me. But with our business, we teach emotional intelligence now. That's our whole focus. And over time, we'll probably do some other things. And, I would definitely I have a daughter in college, and, I hope I can help her somehow to get to the place where she learns something about goal setting. And very much in the spirit of what we discussed, which is goal setting where you can hold goals pretty loosely. My daughter, for instance, she's double majoring in psychology and philosophy. There's 1,000 things you could do with those interests, and you could do them one after another or one for a lifetime. And And I'm glad that so far she isn't locked in on a certain thing. Because I think one of the key things that I don't know how to teach or even really talk about that well, but the universe offers up so many possibilities if you can be aware of them. And if you're locked on a target like a heat-seeking missile, and you have one objective, which is to hit the target, you don't see any other possibilities. And that's not necessarily bad, but I think it's usually bad. I think it's usually to your detriment that you can't take in these other possibilities. So, a good example is like when we started Oji, my partner Andrea and I knew we wanted to work with adults in business, and we had some ideas. And Mark Brackett, who I had come to know and be close with, came to me and said, we'd like to bring emotional intelligence to the workplace. And, if I had a goal already, like I had already locked in, no, we're going to go do this one thing, then I would have said, Mark, that's great. I appreciate the offer. It's really flattering, but I'm going to go just focus on this goal. But instead it was like, whoa, how could we not go after that opportunity? It's right in front of us. And now he's my business partner.
Yeah.
So it's a weird thing. I mean, I like so many things, I think, in life. There's those dualities, those yin and yangs, that you have to hold two conflicting ideas in your head at once. Have goals, hold them loosely.
Yeah. I love that. Thank you. Yeah, we actually do talk about what you just share on this podcast quite a lot. Have strong intentions to loosely held, and be living in duality of the yin and the yang. And I don't know, it's a very in a Western world, I don't know how else to articulate it. This is as simple as I could articulate. And we use the yin yang sign quite a lot as a way to illustrate polarities and non-dual, all these type of very esoteric concepts to my podcast listeners. So I appreciate you articulating it.
Yeah. Well, and I'm no expert on this, but it really does not feel Western, right? Like the reason we resort to using yin and yang or talking about dualities, which, non-duality is a Buddhist concept, is because we don't have like some Western concept for it. But I think it's really important to be able to, accept, conflicting ideas. I mean, they just go on and on. Like in parenting, this conflicting idea of, I want to take care of my kid, but I also want to give them opportunities to make their own mistakes. So, as a parent, you don't ever say, oh, I let my kid run around out on the playground. I hope he'll fall and skin his knee. But you do say, I hope he's safe and I hope he doesn't skin his knee, but he probably will eventually, and he's going to learn something important from that. And I'm not going to try to guard against it ever happening. That's just like one of 1,000 dualities you have to hold in mind if you want to really surf the wave.
Yeah.
To be clear, I don't surf. So I want to be very clear. I don't know what the hell I'm talking about. I tried surfing once and I almost puked. So
no, I mean, surfing is a great metaphor to life in my mind.
Yeah.
And also emotions. Again, the waves, surfing the waves is, and on this podcast we talk a lot about flow and equanimity, and these are all waves are a great metaphor to illustrate, what we're discussing here. But I want to actually segue to the specificity of why you want your desire, you and Andrea's desire to serve adults. What did you say? Adults in business.
Yeah.
I think that's a very crisp
Yeah.
place to start doing a business, right?
Yeah.
Hey, I have a group of people I want to serve, and let's figure out what problems they have and so on and so on. But a core tenet is who you want to serve. How did you guys end up there?
Well, so I think our passion is about helping humans and specifically adults. Not because we don't want to serve kids, but because, for instance, our partners at Yale already serve over 1 million kids in schools. That's a whole different venture. So adults have different educational needs and different ways of getting education. And the fact of reality is that, most of their educational activities happen in the workplace. Once you get out of college, people don't take a lot of classes. They don't do a lot of things on their own. So we honed in on the workplace because that's where it happens. And the other reason why is that's a big part of our lives. As adults, we spend half of our time, half of our life's energy trying to advance the interests of some business. And so it's real, if you want to help adults grow and have a richer life, you have to consider what they're going to do at home. I'd also say you also have to consider what they do at home. And that's why it's Oji Life Lab. It's not Oji Biz Lab. It's about everything in your life, and your work is important, your family is important, and we want to help you with everything. And it's funny, sometimes we interact with people and they're like, yeah, I don't, working with businesses, like I want to help people, but I don't know about the business angle. And it's funny because it's like some people kind of view it as less, not as high of a calling. But a really fundamental part of being an adult for most adults at some point, not everybody works their whole life. Some people raise kids or take care of aging parents or whatever, but most of us spend decades working, and it's meaningful. It's really important. And so we're really passionate about helping people get more meaning and get more success at work and at home.
Yeah. That's a very noble mission. I love it. So if you don't mind, some tactical things to think about. Why not just the founders? Why not just the executives? Why not just the managers, and why not just the employees? Why a very broad umbrella, adults in
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that's really important to us because, what's fueling our passion for this is a belief that these are absolutely fundamental skills for every human. And I feel like I'm somewhat radicalized, just in the sense that I feel like, like internally what I'm thinking is like, oh my God, can't you see? This is absolutely fundamental. This isn't like, I think you and I discussed, people say, oh, emotional intelligence, like who needs that? Like, where does that really apply? I'm like, you don't ask that about oxygen. Who needs oxygen? What's the target market? Like, is there some kind of workplace where water is important? No, everybody needs this. And so it's very important to us that this is not something for elites or the highest echelon. Everybody needs these tools. And that includes, I'll say, sometimes people will focus on, well, which people need it? Like, how do you know the people who could benefit from improving their emotional intelligence? And in my experience, everybody can. I mean, unless I compare it to like perfect pitch. 1 out of 10,000 people has perfect pitch. And as a would-be musician, I hate them because they just, can hear any note and identify it. And the rest of us can't do that. And the rest of us, if we want to learn to play an instrument, have to do the work. And emotional intelligence is that way, and even more rare. I mean, people don't have these skills naturally. My partner Mark always says, like, nobody's born being able to identify the 100 different emotions on the mood meter, have the words for it, to know the skills to use to regulate their emotions and mood. That doesn't happen. So we really feel passionate, like everybody can benefit from this. And obviously some people have a more natural inclination than others, but it's good for everybody. And so that's why, like, it's a phone-based learning program that includes live video-based learning, because it's something we can scale and make cost effective so that millions of people can do it, as opposed to, like back when I was at Microsoft, we used to do these totally, lavish offsites at these exclusive hotels with great food and elite trainers. It was great. I think Microsoft probably spent $5,000 to send me to it. You can't scale that.
Interesting. While you're speaking to a emotional intelligence savant, so everything I learn about emotions, I learn it, I acquire it. I wasn't gifted with just a sharp emotional sense.
Yeah.
So I definitely appreciate your intention to make this skills more widely available. And but before we jump into the teaching modalities, because I think that's a really fascinating topic to even think about. Curious to know if you can give maybe the founders, the entrepreneurs listening, they may have some judgment about, everyone should learn about, emotional intelligence, but I got this other thing I could be spending money on that could, enhance my top line or bottom line, whatever. My company's on fire. I don't have the extra whatever dollar amount to investing Oji, labs. What would you say to them?
Well, that may be true, right? I mean, if the ship is sinking, learning about emotional intelligence may not be the biggest priority. So I would not say that in all cases that your highest learning priority would be emotional intelligence. It might be strategic planning or stress management or change management. So I don't think it's always the high order bit. That said, I do think it's absolutely foundational, and that I've never put it this way, but I think it's true to say, if you have people who are naturally not aware of their emotions and able to regulate them, you will fail. And
Can you say more about that?
Yeah, I mean, we all know absolutely brilliant people who are total assholes, who you can't get work done. And we also know people who are brilliant and they're not assholes, but they're not good at reading other people. They're not good at understanding their emotional state. And so there's this notion of emotional contagion. So basically in any social setting or work setting, the highest status people in the group set the emotional tone for the group, and that's called emotional contagion. So if you have somebody who's really talented but they're anxious, they make everybody anxious. And if they're really talented but angry, they make everybody fearful or angry. And so you're not going to succeed if you do this poorly. Now, I'm not saying everybody does it poorly, but plenty of smart people do it poorly. But the converse, I think, or the corollary is true, which is you're going to succeed more if you do it well. And there's this great video clip. We did a online emotional intelligence conference this summer, and Sigal Barsaid, who's a great psychologist at Wharton, just went on this tear. She's about like emotions impact, work patterns, emotional, relationships, learning, negotiation. She just listed like every sphere of business, and she's like was saying how research impacts all of them. And I think, of course, I think that's true given what I do. And so I think it's a pretty high ROI learning area if you can get better at this one thing and make everything better. For instance, people who are emotionally intelligent make better decisions because you don't make good decisions when you're triggered. So you can improve decision making, you can improve relationships, you can improve sales, you can improve all these things with this one learning effort. So it's pretty valuable.
Do you have any nightmare stories that you could share with us? So that way it's super concrete. Again, you don't have to name names, but
no. Well, there's we're always hearing stories. So as I mentioned, our program includes live video coaching. So it's really cool because we have a team of coaches that Andrea leads that are talking to our learners. And so we hear these stories all the time. And one we've liked recently was about, it was a woman who was an OBGYN who was doing a crash C-section on a COVID positive mother. And I guess during some C-sections, maybe all, I don't know, but the mom's awake. And so they're in surgery and there's friction between the GYN and somebody else on the surgical team. And the OB was our, customer. And she describes how in the moment, in this very high risk situation, this friction really triggered her. And absent learning about emotions, she would have gone off. She would either reacted back, which would have been awful, even more awful because the mother is conscious and hearing everything, or she would have just had to suck it up, shove it down deep, and try to get through the procedure. But instead, because she had the skills, she recognized her emotions. She understood what the gap was between where she was emotionally, which was angry and insulted. And she plotted a course to a different emotional state, and she had the skills that she learned to move to that new state. And the procedure ended. Baby was fine. Mom was fine. Everything was okay. And then the cherry on top was the doctor was then able to go talk to the other person on the team and talk productively about what had happened and actually improve their relationship. It actually became a bonding episode because she was able to skillfully engage. So, that's an example. My dad's a retired surgeon. I think a lot of surgeons are like, I don't have emotions. I don't need emotions. I'm a scientist and a professional. I go in there and I take care of business. But that's a delusion. That's not true. And so this is a really nice example of the highest stakes situation, a mom and a baby, and emotions were at the center of making that have a positive outcome.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Thank you for sharing that. And for the entrepreneurs, for the founders listening to this conversation, I want to say to them directly here, I have personally experienced founders basically, cause their own company implosion.
Yeah,
because they reacted emotionally. They choose to look at a situation through the lens of, how dare you sabotage this, and just, cause, and it's not just, in this case, what Matt's sharing here is a life is at stake, or 2 lives, or 3 lives, multiple lives are at stake, right? So that's the highest stake there. But also in company terms, you could essentially cause millions of dollars because you imploded a company, or you can cause a customer going away, and so on and so on. So what we're talking about here isn't necessarily, theoretical, philosophical, nice to have, actually have real life impact to your organization. So
absolutely. And it's a weird thing. I mean, people call, my partner Mark always says, like, people call it soft skills, but there's nothing soft about it. Both in 2 ways. One is, it's hard to get these skills. It's totally doable, but it takes work. And secondly, it's hard in terms of the value. If you, I could quote all these different studies. But like, there's one study, and I won't remember exactly the construct, but, basically they took a group of participants and they could prime them to have either negative or positive emotions by having them read or certain things. And then having primed them, they would have them make decisions about whether they would take a cash offer or wait longer to get a higher cash payout. So it's a kind of risk trade-off. And they saw very clearly that the people who had a negative emotional state were more prone to just take the immediate cash payout, which on a risk-adjusted basis wasn't the right decision. But when you're in a negative mood state, you're more inclined to do that. And so there's thousands of studies like this over time. Read a book like Thinking Fast and Slow, which is kind of a Bible to me, all about the cognitive biases that rule our lives. And if you want to get a hold of those biases, you have to start by understanding your emotional life and be able to regulate it.
Yeah, 100%. Now, if you don't mind sharing some, I know that you have publicly shared with us, you've been through therapy, I'm projecting, I'm assuming you meditate, I'm sure you have some other practices as a way to self-regulate your emotional states. Can you share with us metaphors or mental models about why particular modality per se, and how you think about emotions, so that way it helps, let's say, someone listening to this who don't quite understand the importance of emotions yet?
Yeah. Well, boy, I mean, there's a lot of stuff I've done. And so just to kind of do a laundry list, I've been in therapy for a long time. That's been incredibly profound for me. Obviously, emotional intelligence training is key. I haven't sat for a long time in meditation, but I do incorporate mindful practices in my life just all the time. Try to be in touch with my body, try to relax and try to be more mindful. It's Thich Nhat Hanh's written great books about, kind of like, you can meditate when you're washing the dishes, because you can do mindful dishwashing. Even little things like, I'm trying to be better about eating mindfully, which I'm really bad at. Like, I feel so shitty when I kind of look down and see an empty plate and realize I didn't actually experience any of it. Like, wow, that was 3 slices of pizza. When did that happen?
Yeah.
So, I think you have to, I try to do it, be mindful as much as possible. Even this session, like, I didn't look at any of the other webinars you've done or podcasts. I didn't want to get that in my head. I wanted to just be here with you and having this exchange to be mindful. And that's why I didn't have a lot of goals. They kind of would get in the way. So, it's in Buddhism, they refer to the practice, and it seems like an esoteric word. What does a practice mean? But the point is, it's a process that goes on for your whole life. It's not like you get the knowledge and you're done. That's not a thing. It's all about the practice. And, people who are skilled meditators, and I wouldn't say I am one, but know that, one of the core, again, kind of dualities of mindful practice is not striving, not being attached to any goal, to just be free floating and let things happen. And so, I try to do that in terms of mindfulness as much as I can.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing. So, but if you don't mind sharing the specific path that you took and then why you took them, because you prefer a therapist, this meditation as an example. I haven't had, enough experience with therapists.
Yep.
So obviously have my own biases. I haven't actually, just I don't have enough data points to have any kind of opinions about it. So why therapist versus, let's say, meditations or plant medicine ceremonies, or these all other like EMDR, a lot of different paths to the self-regulation that we all want, right?
Yeah, and say across my wife and 2 kids and friends and family, I mean, I've seen a lot of different things. I think the most important thing to say is it's a toolkit, and I don't think there's one answer for everyone. People have to find the things they like. My trajectory is that when my wife and I were pretty newly married, I don't remember if we had our first kid yet, but we started seeing a marriage counselor who had been trained by John Gottman, who's a very well-known psychologist up in Seattle. His books are fantastic about relationships, what relationships are, how they work. So, in a long sequence of strokes of good fortune, we met a therapist who had been trained by Gottman. He was a fantastic guy, super helpful. I think that was, in some ways, my first step on the journey down to do Oji, in the sense that, you get early in a marriage, and if you're paying attention, you notice, oh, this is a skill set. I don't know how to do this. And people's come up with these answers. Well, you learn this stuff from your parents. My parents, my dad's a surgeon, my mother's an attorney. They're both retired now, but they are not similar to me and my wife in terms of how their marriage works and how they function. So I can't. What worked for them is not going to work for us. And so you get into it, and you learn. Okay, this is a set of skills. I'm never going to be a master, but I better get started. And then there's the meta point, which I really took, which was like, oh, there's all this shit I need to know that nobody taught me. I mean, I didn't finish college, but I'm pretty sure that junior year they didn't have a marriage class. So I didn't miss it. It just wasn't offered. So that was step one for me. And then my wife saw a sequence of we moved to the Bay Area. We saw some other marriage counselors, which was helpful. And then around 13 years ago, I got a referral to the woman who's still my therapist. And I still remember going into her office and sitting down and telling her how I wanted her to help me with my marriage and help me figure out my wife. And I think within 3 minutes, she basically said, well, your wife's not here, so let's work on you. And we've been working to help me understand me ever since. And there's all kinds of therapy. There's cognitive behavioral therapy, which a lot of people find enormously helpful. There's more kind of proactive therapists who are the type that'll say, well, CK, what I think you need to do is go march in and tell so-and-so this. My therapist is much more traditional. She asks me questions. She offers very few suggestions. Because she's focused on helping me build the muscles to figure things out. And I've seen her at some points once a week and at some points twice a week. And it's just a essential part of my life. And, my mother finds the whole thing kind of mysterious that I do therapy. And she's like, is something wrong? Is there something you're trying to deal with? Actually, no, there's not anything wrong. But I can tell there's more.
Yeah.
And so I've spent more money and more time on therapy than any other thing I've done for myself, and thank goodness it's the best thing I ever did. But just to reiterate, that's good for me. Other people do other things. Some people need to see psychiatrists, and that's super important because they're dealing with anxiety or depression or ADHD or OCD or whatever. And then, finally, there's all the emotional intelligence work. And whereas I think of therapy as kind of wandering around, exploring the territory. Imagine like searching through a forest and looking for interesting discoveries. The emotional intelligence work I do is much more, we give you a map, we teach you how to navigate, and you are going from point to point. It's not a replacement for therapy, but it is more direct and deterministic.
I appreciate that distinction, actually. That's actually very helpful. Thank you. Yeah, I like it. More outcome versus process driven.
Yeah. And they're both useful.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. I mean, you're speaking to an audience of visionaries, seekers, impact-driven entrepreneurs. So yeah, what you describe is perfect. Anything else you want to say about the selection criteria for your therapist?
I think chemistry is everything. I'm incredibly fortunate. I have this therapist who, she just never hits a wrong note for me. Like, she totally is on my wavelength. And I've known other therapists who are very talented, and I never would have had that relationship with them. So, you have to be ready to go in and have a couple sessions and say, thank you, I'm just not feeling it. Because your goal is to be with somebody that you can be completely honest with and totally kind of naked. And I'm not sure I am, or I've gotten there, but that's the goal. So I think you have to look for that right chemistry. And then the second thing is, not to like go down a rat hole, but people get really confused about the difference between therapists and psychiatrists. If you have,
elaborate.
Well, I mean, if you have depression or anxiety or ADHD or what have you, you need to see a psychiatrist who's a medical doctor, who's an expert at prescribing these medications. Sometimes general practitioners will prescribe them. I don't recommend that. Sometimes therapists have abilities to work with the doctor to get you prescriptions. But in my experience, the best thing to do is get to a psychiatrist that you trust if you have those kinds of challenges. But, it's like, I once used the analogy of like, if you're an ice skater, and your form isn't great, okay, you need a coach, which is like a therapist. But if you have a broken ankle, your coach cannot help you. Like, until the ankle is supported, you cannot improve your skating, and that's the psychiatrist. So like, if you're suffering from chronic depression, you need to get to a psychiatrist. It's another one of these things where I like inside I'm just like, it's so fundamental and such a failing of our society that we don't even give people this basic understanding about what therapy is and what psychiatry is. And you hear these horrible stories about people who haven't left their house for 3 weeks, but they're talking a lot to their friends, and it's clear they're depressed, and it's clear that they need medical help. It's a medical condition, and they're not getting it. And it breaks my heart.
Yeah, thank you for that distinction. You're right. I mean, part of conversations like these for me is I want to normalize these type of conversations, because there's, especially around high performers, entrepreneurs, there's still some level of stigma around mental health, mental wellness, mental fitness, mental performance. So I use these words interchangeably because, I mean, precisely, it's like going to the gym. There's nothing wrong with going to the gym, right? You want to get better at your emotional ability, your emotional skill, you practice by using these type of emotional skills platforms. Similarly, you want to understand how your mind works, go talk to a coach, you go talk to a therapist, go talk to a psychologist. You know, it's totally okay. There's nothing wrong with that.
Well, I thank you for doing that. I think it's incredibly important. And that's why, like, for me, if I tell somebody I'm busy tomorrow, I don't ever say I have something to do. I say because I'm going to see my therapist, because I want to make it a tiny little bit safer for people to feel like that's a normal part of life. And you know, when I talk to the people I know who see psychiatrists, I also want to make that normal. It's a medical problem. No one's embarrassed that they go to the doctor because they have shin splints or because they're having their diabetes treated. And it should be the same thing for mental health issues. It's totally underground, and it's very sad. And actually, a psychiatrist I know here in the Bay Area, Michael Freeman, he's published a paper about incidents of mental health issues with entrepreneurs, and people can find it online. I actually was part of his study, and he does find that there is, I think, increased incidence of some mental health issues amongst entrepreneurs. And you know, the sad thing is I think some people feel like, oh, but it's my advantage. It's not your fucking advantage.
Say more about that. Actually, please say more about that.
You know, people are like, oh, my anxiety drives me. It's what keeps me going. Yeah. I mean, I just like take it to its extreme. So let's say you could build a wildly successful company, make a fortune, and be anxious for the rest of your life. Is that a good trade-off? I hope the answer is no, right? I mean, it's hard to enjoy the benefits of that if you feel like shit every day.
But the illusion is, yes, the illusion is I'm going to be anxious short term, but when I get successful, then I'll have the life satisfaction and the fulfillment that money can afford me. Then I won't be anxious anymore.
Yes, I think that's an astute observation. And there's a lot of things like that where I view them. There's this whole series of mirages where people feel like, okay, when I get to the mirage, it's not a mirage. I think it's an oasis. When I get there, the water will flow, the fruit will be on the tree, I can relax in the shade. It's all going to be great, but it's not real. You know, you have to make these things good today. And so you don't need to be anxious. You don't need to be depressed. You know, your OCD is not your secret weapon. That's not to say you want to go get, I mean, there's many ways of treating with these things. I mean, sometimes the treatment is, you know, cognitive behavioral therapy. It's not medical at all, but you want to go find out. And everybody needs to make their own choice. I'm not saying what people should do, but what I do feel strongly about is we need to get rid of the stigma so people feel like they have the liberty and the support to make the choices that are best for them, instead of feeling like, oh, I don't want to be the person who goes, like my mother asked me about therapy, like, hey, she's very supportive about it now after all these years, but there was definitely a period of time it's like, why does my son need this? And the answer is, in a literal sense, I don't need it, but it's unbelievably valuable to me.
Yeah. Thank you for making and sharing your story publicly. I mean, my analogy to my younger self is CK, the younger CK is very effective in achieving goals, but the quality of life is fucking miserable.
Right.
So, you can live your life, be miserable, or you don't have to be miserable. And the added benefit is you're gonna be even more effective. Why not?
Right. Well, it's a funny test, CK, and I'm very mindful of making sure we hit the topics you want to hit. But like when you think about American attitudes towards European cultures, it's like, oh, the Germans, they can't even open their businesses certain days of the week, and they have 6 weeks of paid vacation every year, and like, how could you get anything done? And their economy isn't as productive as ours. And I'm no expert on comparative economies, but anyways, it's just this like attitude of their culture is somehow inferior because they don't have their nose to the grindstone as much as us. I'm not sure that's that awful. 6 weeks of paid vacation to be with your family, to build relationships, to decompress, the fact that you can't work 60 hours a week. I mean, maybe the gross domestic product, the per capita is lower, but is that all that matters? I don't think that's the only measure of our success is the money we make or the status. In fact, I don't even think it's the major one. So, taking care of ourselves is essential.
Yeah. So let's segue a little bit about your transition from selling the first company to the second company, and then finding your new mission, right? Because on this podcast, we do talk about the hero's journey, right? In my mind, each transition requires letting go of one's identity a bit. So some people on the podcast have phrased them as dark night of the soul, belly of the whale, these type of moments for them. So did you ever go through that? Those type of darker moments during those transitions at all?
I think the one time, selling to Apple was, I was 23 years old. I was happy to do it. I think selling to Microsoft was pretty similar. I think the one time I really had a hard time adjusting was when I left Microsoft, because I went from a big job with a big team where the system was set up to make everything very easy for me, to, literally being home with my newborn daughter, where there was no system and I was changing diapers, and I didn't have any mojo.
After leaving Microsoft.
Yeah, I stayed home. I was just home, for a decade. I did a lot of things. I ran a nonprofit and sat on boards and stuff. But, going from running the number 4 website on the planet to being a guy at home with his baby and wife was a big change. And I wanted the change, and I think I understood the change. And day to day, I felt good about it. But about once a month, I had a dream where I would be at Microsoft and nobody would know who I am. And it's like, oh, that really hurts. I'm not a player anymore.
Yeah, relevance. Yeah.
Relevance, importance.
Mm-hmm.
I think even more than that, I think it's just when you're in a high status position, it's like the rules of gravity have been dialed down for you. It's just things are easier. People come along. They don't argue as much. When you ask them to do something, they just do it. When I was at Microsoft, I could say to my assistant, let's have a reception, let's have a Friday kind of reception for everybody because we're going to ship product. And it's just like, I'd walk downstairs and there'd be this whole catered event that I did nothing. It just would happen, it's back to that kind of issue of emotional contagion. I go into meetings and I'd be the most senior person in the room, and everybody would, if I wanted to talk, they would shut up and let me talk. If I asked them to do something, they'd write it down and go do it. And it's bullshit. That's not real. That's not reality. And I really consciously walked away from it. But I had dreams about that loss for years, to get used to just, you're not that guy anymore. So I wouldn't call it a darkening of the soul for me. Fortunately, I was like in this wonderful time with my baby daughter and home with my wife and getting to explore all kinds of new things. So there was a lot of good, but there was some attachment there.
Mm. So did you actively take on any practice as a way to adjust to a new identity at all? And by the way, the context of my question is this, because some of the guests have been on the show before, or clients, they have a real hard time adjusting to it.
Mm-hmm.
So if you have anything tactical that you can share, whoever's listening, or to really help them going through this transition right now, that would be super helpful.
Yeah, I don't know if I remember it accurately. I do know that it was around that time that I really started reading a lot of Buddhist thinking. And so I started, soon after I read a book on mindfulness by Thich Nhat Hanh and started practicing. And I started reading other texts about Buddhism, which to me is not a religion. It's really a philosophy. And that was really profound to me. I don't know that I can connect it with that kind of attachment fading away. I think probably more than anything else, it was just time passing and me moving on to other things. But I do find that helpful. And then kind of the overall practice, which really just came down to a decision, was I exited tech. I just didn't really, I sat on tech boards, but I was not immersed in that. And when my wife and I moved back to the Bay Area from Seattle, we intentionally moved to a part of the Bay Area that's not a tech haven. And, when I go down to Silicon Valley, the way I always look at it is like in Silicon Valley, when you walk into a restaurant, everybody turns to look to see who you are, to see if you're someone. Up here, nobody gives a shit. You walk in, nobody cares. And that was, I think, in a way, the biggest decision I made, which was just to extricate myself fully and put it behind me. And I'm not in Seattle. I'm not in high tech. I'm off doing something else. I got to move on.
Got it. Well, that is a hack, right? Put yourself in an environment where you can invent a new identity, where your old identity didn't matter to anyone.
Yeah.
Environment. So beautiful. Anything else before we move on to the next thing? Okay.
I'm good.
All right. Beautiful. Well, let's talk about the teaching aspect of emotionality, because in my mind, it's one of those things, right? You can teach them certain skills, but if they are too attached to the mechanistic aspect of it, then it becomes kind of miss the point again, right? So it's like having a strong skill but loosely held, so that way they can start to use it more intuitively, naturally. And I say that from someone who went through that journey. So why did you choose to use, let's say, video training plus life coaching as a modality of the best way to transfer this type of knowledge in a bite-sized way to people in business?
Yeah. Well, I think there's a couple key observations. I mean, one obviously is different people learn differently. And so if you have just a single, it's kind of like if you serve a plate of food and the only thing on it is a hamburger, but there's no bun, there's no tomato, there's no lettuce, there's no French fries. For some people are like, well, I don't want just the hamburger. I need other things. And so part of it is just from a learning science point of view, you want something for everyone. So that's one issue. I think the bigger issue is that the kind of learning that you're doing in the Emotion Life Lab, which is our product, it's about forming a habit. And it's a habit that is by its very nature built on what I'll call personal knowledge. The example I sometimes give is learning to write an essay, a thesis in high school. I don't know if you and I talked about it, but freshman year, first week of English class, they tell you you're going to learn to write a thesis. And what's a thesis? It's about stating a proposition, backing it up with 3 points of evidence, developing each of those 3 points, and then re-summarizing it in a conclusion. That's it. That's all you need to know. That's all the data about writing an essay. And then if you're like most people, you struggle all through high school writing really crappy theses. And half of people graduate from high school and they're still not good at it. And they go to college and they have to learn it, if they go to college. So why is that? It's because knowing about the thing is totally different from knowing how to do the thing.
Right. Intellectual understanding versus embodied.
Yeah, exactly. And part of it, there's a couple things. One is you have to make it personally relevant. So you need to understand, in the case of emotional intelligence, okay, so I need to be able to recognize my emotions. What does that mean for me? Okay, we have some people who come into the Life Lab and they're like, I didn't think I had emotions. Like I never thought about it. We have other people who say, I have emotions all day long and I can't even sort them out. Wherever you are, I as the teacher, I don't know that. You need to figure that out. You need to map your emotional landscape and learn where the landmarks are and how to get around in it. And so you have to learn that personal knowledge that's not outside of you, it's inside of you. So I can't give it to you because I can't possibly have it. You have to find it yourself. And then you have to also learn these habits, these skills that you can repeat, and not just learn them in a mechanical way, but I often think in terms of tennis, because I've been playing a lot of tennis. When the ball's coming at you at 20 miles an hour, it can't be pivot, put down my racket, cock my wrist. It can't be conscious because the ball's moving too fast. It has to become automatic. And you have to have a real sense of where your body is in space and how your muscles and joints are moving. And you have to let your your entire nervous system take control, not your cognitive faculties, but rather your larger nervous system. And it's similar with emotional intelligence. So you need to get to this place where you're in the operating room and you get triggered and you go, oh, I'm triggered. What am I feeling? I'm angry. Why am I angry? Oh, what's anger? Anger's a perceived injustice, being wrong. Yeah, I feel like this other person wasn't fair to me. What can I do about that? Ooh, you know what? I'm going to use reframing. Reframing is a way of reinterpreting. Say, you know what? This other person in the operating room, they're doing their best. They want to take care of the patient too. Maybe they had a bad day. Let's give them the benefit of the doubt. All right, I feel better. Now I'm able to perform. But for all that to happen, it's not about, my partner Mark at Yale has got a great book, Permission to Feel. I recommend it to everyone. It's a great introduction to emotional intelligence. But when you're done reading it, you will not be emotionally intelligent. You'll have information about emotional intelligence. So that's why we structured our system to be such that you actually have lots of activities where you reflect, where you do things like come up with emotion goals. When I'm with my family, what emotion would I like to feel? How am I going to get there? What's the practice to do that? When I'm in work, what's the emotions I want to feel? How am I going to get there? And you get to see a lot of examples of people talking about their emotions. You get to hear our partners at Yale, Mark and Robin Stern, who's our other co-founder, hear them provide expert advice. And then we have these live sessions that are really key to help you, what we call consolidate the learning. So you kind of, like, we have this tool called the mood meter that lets you map your emotions in terms of energy and pleasantness. You get introduced to that and you know about it, but then you need to practice it for a while. And then we have a live session where you work with one of our coaches where they help you really become more of an expert. So you leave not just having an awareness, but really, okay, I really get it now. I understand the red quadrant in the mood meter is high energy, negative emotion, and it's useful in certain circumstances, and it's really lousy in other circumstances. And I need to be aware of that. So we bring all of that together, and then the key is that because it's spread over 50 little steps, it takes you about 3 months to complete it. And if you just think about it, it's common sense in a way. Like, if we gave you a 1-day class, you might really like it, but we all know that we're going to forget it all. And that's just that 100 years of research has shown what's called the forgetting curve. If you learn something and don't have it reinforced, it is gone. And yet we still do these stupid workshops, but they're not going to work. So we have the power of smartphones now, so that I can learn 10 minutes a day for a couple months, so that at the end, it is in there. It's not going out. You're going to remember this probably for your whole life. So it's a real different way of learning. And, what it comes down to for us is that our goal isn't to sell you something. Our goal is to have you really change your life. And yeah, we're going to sell you something to get you there, but it's not enough to take your money. It's really important to us that, a year from now, you're saying, I think about this all the time. I use these skills every day, because you have emotions every day.
Yeah, I really liked, so specifically around that, I was watching Mark giving a Google talk the other day, and a few years ago, he said, we have multiple emotions every minute. And therefore, within a day, ultimately, we have a couple thousand emotions that we experience. And like me, my sensitivity to my emotions isn't that high. So I was very surprised to hear that we have a couple thousand emotions every day. So this actually allows me to develop higher awareness of my own emotions, as well as a better way to articulate that to another person. So
Yeah, exactly. And the analogy I use sometimes, CK, is it's emotions are kind of like the weather. They happen. It doesn't matter if you don't want them to. They do. You can act like they don't. You can say, I'm going outside without a jacket. Sometimes you're going to get wet, and sometimes you're going to get, burn up. You can just pretend, but it doesn't serve you. It's never better to ignore the weather. But the other reason I like comparing it to the weather is, the weather is always changing, and it's not good or bad. Obviously we would rather not live through a hurricane, but you may not want rain now, but here in the Bay Area, we need it. And you may not want it to be hot, but the plants need it. So it's all going to come. Every possible emotion will happen. We don't get to choose what it is, but we can be smart about it. And if it's super hot out and you're going for a run, you can do the right thing. And if it's raining out and you're going for a run, you can do the right thing. You can go for a run either way, but it's definitely to your advantage to know what the weather is and to plan accordingly.
So I have a fundamental question, if you don't mind, and this is very esoteric. So let me know if it's too much.
I'm all excited.
Yeah. So in a Buddhist study, the goal, if any, is to be equanimous, meaning not grasping for positive emotions or averting negative ones, right? So emotions are come and go like the weather, right? Makes a lot of sense. So again, let me know if this is too esoteric, since your product is about getting from point A to point B, as in outcome driven emotions, I feel terrible now, I want to feel better.
Mm-hmm.
Is the premise there feeling better is better, or is just part of a way to get to equanimity? Does that make sense?
Yeah, it's a super interesting question. To feel my way through it, I'm not sure I have the best answer. Mark talks a lot about being an emotion scientist. And by that he means to look at your emotions and think about it he says, don't be an emotion judge, be an emotion scientist. So it's just like, okay, this is, I am angry, I am anxious, I am elated, I am sad, whatever. So I think that is very compatible with the Buddhist notion of non-attachment, right? It's like, just what is it? Okay, so that's the first step. And then in terms of saying, where do you want to be? It's not, so like one of the things we, I'll give away a little bit of the fun stuff we do in the live video stuff is, one of the things we talk about is which emotions are good, which is a trick question because every emotion has its utility. So again, not being attached to being in what's the yellow quadrant, which is high energy, positive emotion. I want to feel elated all the time. That would be kind of an attachment. And I think if you talk to me when I was 25, I would say, yeah, of course you always want to be there. But there's actually lots of science that says you actually don't. If you're doing, for instance, really detailed work, like you're working on a financial model, you're working on your startup's financial model. I just feel great. The world's conspiring to make everything possible. That's a shitty place to be for real detailed and somewhat skeptical, analytical thinking. And so you want to feel a little bit, there's what's called kind of cognitive window. You want to close the cognitive window. So you're less about what's possible and you're focused in on like the hard nitty gritty details of how this is going to work. So the point is, you don't want to be attached to the good emotions. Because they're not the good emotions. There are good emotions or productive emotions for certain situations. Right now, I'm roughly in the green quadrant, which is moderate energy, very pleasant. But if I was just like, CK, let's talk. I mean, it would be awful, right? I'd be off the screen. I'd be pacing around the room here. That's not good for this setting. So,
Yeah.
so I think it's actually pretty consistent. And yes, I think there's an issue about grasping. But again, I think that the reality is, if you're an emotion scientist, you're saying, well, I feel really sad right now, and I need to go speak in front of 500 people in a conference hall. It would be great if I could get into the yellow, but I can't. That's just reality. So let's be, and that would be grasping. Like, I have to get there. No, you don't have to, and you can't. So what can you do? Okay, well, I can get to the high green. Like, if I do some breathing exercises and maybe do some best self and use some of the other techniques, reframing, I'll get good enough. So I'd like to think it's pretty consistent.
Yeah. Thank you for hearing a philosophical question. Because I think about this question a lot myself, because my job as a coach is ultimately, for me, people come to me, yes, they want to feel a particular way, but also they want to perform at a higher level, and they want to get to that big idea, and they want to, make better decisions, as you said. So what do I do as a way to help them get there, right? And in my mind, having either attachment to positive emotions or aversion to negative ones, those are all barriers to getting in touch to their inner truth, the equanimity, where intuitions and their wisdom come from. So whatever processes I run them through is a way to peel back the layers of illusions and constructs and limiting beliefs and so forth, to tap into that state. And from that place of equanimity, then you have new insights of looking at these objective data points, and then come up with the micro actions that you take, perhaps newly, towards this thing that you're solving. That's the mental model that I have.
Yeah. Well, I think that makes a lot of sense. And equanimity is a full-time job, man.
It's so anyone that basically tout permanent removal of limiting beliefs or permanent state of enlightenment, I'm always very I'm willing to be in that experience, or to meet someone who's like that. But to me, these are all temporary states, and then we come back to it over and over again. So
yeah, I mean, it's another duality, right? Like, there's this goal that we always have, and at least for me, I recognize I'm not going to get there.
Yeah, so
that's fine.
And I really appreciate what Oji Lab is doing, because ultimately what you're teaching, from my interpretation of it, correct me if I'm wrong, it's self-awareness. Where am I at right now? What's my emotion? What are my thoughts? And then, instead of grasping or averting to them, and just take note of that first and foremost, and take the micro steps towards an emotional state that's more productive or conducive to what is it that you wanted to have.
Yeah, self-awareness is the first step, and then it's the regulation. We call it recognize and regulate, and you know that because I know you've been in the Life Lab. So you want to, where do I want to be for the goal I have? And it's that old saying: if you don't know where you're going, any road will get you there. So you can ignore all this stuff and just kind of let any emotion come up and see how the cards fall. But it's much better to be able to have a plan. And it's really fun working with people, because they start saying, oh, so when is optimism good for me? And it's, like any parent will tell you, it's not always good to be optimistic about your kids. Like, oh, he's fine. Yeah, he's just taking the bus across town. He's 2 years old. It's not a problem. It's not good. So you wanna be able to pick that emotion, and people become pretty discriminating about these emotional states that they never thought about before. But now they're really thinking like, yeah, maybe a little bit of anxiety is good for what I'm about to do.
Okay, so is that part of the principles, the ethos of what you make it explicit to your users?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, we really, that mood meter is a 10 by 10 grid. So there's 100 emotions on there. There's about 2,200 words, I think, in English that are emotion words, but we focus on these 100 words. And I don't mean like people memorize the words or anything like that and can list them off, but they become discriminating. They're like, okay, if I'm about to have a one-on-one meeting with somebody who works for me and I'm going to give them some pretty strong feedback, I probably want to be in kind of low energy towards the middle of pleasantness, maybe a little bit towards negative. I mean, nobody wants to get tough feedback while you're smiling and acting like that's a great day. Hey, come into my office. I'm feeling great. The stock market's up. I bought a new car this weekend. It's so great. I got to tell you, really kind of screwed up things at work. That's not a good conversation. So, like, okay, I want to shift into that other place. How can I do that? So, we're going to teach you those techniques.
That's assuming that they have the rubric in their mind, knowing what's appropriate.
Yes.
For an emotional savant, delivering bad news while being really joyous may sound like a great idea.
Right. And that's why you need to go, like, that's one of the things you do in one of our first live sessions is you talk about this very explicitly. So we can tell people who feel like, being high energy positive all the time is great and everybody loves my energy and I should just do it all the time. One of the things we're very explicit about is like, no, that's not always the best place. Somebody comes to you and says, I feel awful. I just found out a good friend of mine from high school lost his job and his dad's got cancer. What are you going to be like, really up with people? Hey, wow, there's a silver lining here. There's no silver lining. It sucks. So if you want to be empathic, you have to get where they are. Some people that's natural. Other people need to learn it.
Yeah. Quick question about motivation real quick. Because in my mind, teaching these type of life skills, super important work and very beneficial. And everyone wants to feel good, right? But the chosen mechanism for people feeling good, there's a lot of quote unquote easier ones, like watching TV, just, escape from reality,
right?
Or, whatever addiction they have. And then they don't have to necessarily do the work to be better at these type of skills. So I'm curious to know from your perspective as the founder CEO, what incentives or do you highlight to them such that they're intrinsically motivated or extrinsically motivated to really do the work of 50 days to be better at emotional intelligence?
Yeah, that's, I hadn't really thought about kind of the escapist solution of, 10 hours of Xbox.
Because you get immediate feedback, right? It's like, I don't deal with it. I feel good. It's exciting. I go watch a movie.
Yeah.
Whatever addictions I have, right? Go do that versus do the work of microstep to be better at those skills.
Yeah. I mean, it strikes me that question, CK, is, if you're feeling, so emotions are short term, right? They come and go, like you said about Mark, 1,000 emotions a day. So those short-term feelings are harder to address with, Xbox or a candy bar, maybe a candy bar, but there, a lot of those things are not going to work. Longer mood states, if I'm just feeling, I have pervasive anxiety, it lasts all the time. That's where, you use alcohol or whatever, or Xbox. I keep using Xbox because I have a 17-year-old son for whom the answer to many questions is Xbox.
Yeah.
But I think, the way we try to talk about it is to just be very science-based. There's 5 areas that emotions impact you, and that emotional intelligence will help you. And if I'm lucky, I'll remember all 5 right now. So decision-making is a big one. Attention, memory, and learning is a big one. Creativity and performance is one. Mental and physical health is one. And relationship quality. So if you kind of think back through that list, do I want to make better decisions? Do I want to learn better? Do I want to produce better stuff? Do I want to feel better? And do I want to have better relationships? Yeah, I want all those. I mean, those are really fundamental. So most people, when we walk them through that list, A, believe that emotions impact those things, and B, want those benefits. There are some people, depending on the group, 10, 15% of people who'll say, either I don't want to go there, like this just sounds like a world of hurt. I don't want to think about my emotions, for understandable reasons, right? It's painful. It can be painful, and it's certainly work. And then there's also people who are just like, this is just a bunch of bullshit, which is usually about them saying, I know my emotions have negative impacts on other people, and I just don't think I can do about it. And, we'll literally have people say, my anger serves me well.
Yep.
My
anger gives me my edge.
Yeah. I'm a sales manager and my anger is like great.
Yeah.
And we'll try and say, okay, but don't you think you could kick butt and not be angry and not churn through your sales staff because they can't stand working with you? And some people say, yeah, maybe. And some people say, no. Dude, I sold $3 million worth of product last year. I'm not changing anything. Okay. But I think most people respond to that list of 5 areas and find it compelling. And they don't view kind of that kind of avoidant behavior you listed as being an alternative. It may be an alternative for other things, but not for this.
Yeah. And do you guys help them concretize? Let's say I want to be more creative. Oh, okay, great. Be more creative in what area? How would you rate it on the, on the scale 1 to 5? And so that way you can help them quantify and then the progress they make as they go through your program.
Yeah. So, I mean, obviously there are limits to ways you can quantify this stuff. Like my creativity went from 64 to 75. I mean, like, I don't know how to measure that stuff. But we do, early in the program, you come up with your emotion goals. Like, what is it you want? It could be, I want to make better decisions at work. It could be, I want to have better relationships with patients. It could be, I want to get along better with my teenage kids. I mean, there's all kinds of things that people come up with. And so they come up with a set of them. And then towards the end of the program, they actually have a one-on-one coaching session with one of our coaches where they look at those goals and see how they're doing. And to the extent that they have more work to do, they work with the coach to come up with what practices they can use to get there. So we do, work on that. for better or worse, it's not at the level of like, oh, you want to be better at decision making, so you should use the best self strategy and do this. It's much more about giving people a toolkit that they can experiment with. It's like, here's a toolkit, try to build some things. And, some people might like the hammer and some people like the vice grip. And, it just depends what you're building. You kind of need to know the tools, and then you'll make good stuff.
Yeah. So I was the head of culture for my last startup, and my thinking around it has evolved from the very beginning to the middle to right before I exited that startup. It was top down, and it was top down, bottom up, and then it was making tools, an ecosystem, so that way people can pick and choose what works best for them towards their own personal goals. So I really appreciate the way you articulate.
Yeah. I mean, I think a big kind of like guiding principle in everything we do that we say to each other all the time is we want to meet people where they're at. So, I mean, it's not, I don't know what's right for you. I don't know what you find resonant. I don't know what you find comfortable or uncomfortable or exciting or motivating. So I'm here to offer a system for you to find those things out. And if you don't care, then what I'm doing is irrelevant. You're just not going to play. But the philosopher John Dewey 100 years ago, who wrote a lot on education, he had this very fundamental premise, which is it is impossible to teach anyone anything. That the only learning that ever happens is an internal process. And that's pretty profound when you accept that, like, I can't cause you to know something. You have to choose to know it, and you have to do the work to assimilate it and do everything else. And so if you have the humility and accept that, which I do, I think it is just a given, then like, I can't decide what people are going to learn. They have to want to.
Do you guys use any gamification mechanics of the way, like a scoreboard or leaderboard, things like that, so that way people are incentivized to take more of your modules? And
yeah, we do some today. We have some today, and we have some that'll come out in the next month or so. It is a little dodgy because the kind of leaderboard that makes sense in a sales team to sell more widgets is really cheesy when you're talking about emotional growth. You know what I mean? So we're pretty sensitive about it. But we do have some cool stuff coming that will kind of recognize people for being consistent and using the mood meter and other stuff, so that they'll have a clear sense that they're making progress.
Yeah. I asked that question because there's also that group dynamic component to it as well, right? It's not just a game of one, a solo game. It's rather, this is a group dynamics, quote unquote, game, right? Yeah. You are using an organization. So culture, group dynamics is a huge aspect of it. So I was very curious to know how you, introduce it, but in a very nuanced way. So
yeah, and we looked at doing a bunch of features that gamified things within groups, and after talking to customers, we walked away from it. Again, it's one thing to say who's going to be a sales leader. That's very safe. But when we looked at it from a kind of emotion learning standpoint, it became clear, like, as soon as you're going down the road, like, so-and-so's making more progress on their emotional learning, and everybody else feels like kind of shitty because they're not doing it's like we're doing exactly the wrong thing for what we're trying to do, which is cultivate emotional well-being. So we walked away from all of that stuff.
Yeah. This person, Matt, is the emotional black belt in our company.
Yeah. I'm the best. I worked really hard. I'm the best person in the whole team at emotions.
Yeah.
So, not that I'm lording it over you and trying to feel superior, but
Yeah.
I'm the best.
Come to me to help you settle any differences among you people who are yellow belts and orange belts.
Exactly.
Yeah. If you don't mind, can we zoom out a bit on the sort of the societal? COVID time, super stressful, right? Economy is still not stable. Remote work, right? So there's a lot of, and then obviously U.S. The transition of power, all of this could be very stressful, forcing functions for people to, go through their emotional roller coasters, right?
Yep.
Do you feel this is how do I say this, the perfect timing for something like Oji Labs, and how do you foresee this could benefit those who are going through their emotional roller coasters in their company life?
Yeah. Well, I think you and I, when we were chatting last week, I mean, it is unfortunately a time when people need this more than ever. And, when the pandemic hit, first we got knocked on our butts like everyone else. And pretty quickly we realized, wow, people really need this. And so we put out an ebook that thousands of people have downloaded. What do we call it? I think it's called Corona Care. And we've done tons of webinars, and we just keep doing them. And some of them are dealing with the pandemic, and some of them are dealing with all the discussions about systemic racism. And we even did kind of a flash webinar, after the events on January 6th. 2 days later, we did a flash webinar with Mark Brackett to just say, like, kind of WTF, what happened to 2021 was supposed to be this big upgrade. And we have people storming Congress. So, I think the need is heightened, unfortunately. And it depends, like my parents who are in their 80s and 70s, they have their own concerns. Fortunately for them, they got their first vaccine shot a few days ago. And like all of us, we were so relieved. Like, how great is it? They got a shot. We've got school age kids that we're dealing with. Other people have even younger kids. Can you imagine helping your kindergartner do Zoom school? I mean, fortunately my kids are older. My gosh. So there's so much stress, and then workplaces are in flux. And so, I think it's more needed than ever. And I hope that even as things improve, and I think they are, or I should say will, but it's going to happen. I hope that people still recognize, okay, that anxiety I was feeling was worse, but I feel it regularly, even in the best of times. And the stress I was feeling about work was worse, but the fact is I feel stress all the time at work, even when sales are great. So, I think it's been a pretty weird experience being in the middle of this emotional intelligence project, in the middle of the single biggest disruption to the world's emotional climate in 70 years.
Yeah. So what's the dream? So say moving forward, product launch is going well, your new features, people love it. What do you see as possible for your customers, yourself, the future of Oji Labs?
Well, I think the dream for us, I mean, I don't think it's a surprise after what we've discussed, is I think the dream is, I think there's 7 billion humans and they all need to learn this. And a lot of them will get it through their schools over time. And Mark Brackett and Robin Stern have been very successful, as other people have, training kids in schools. But us old folks need it too. And so our dream is to train millions and even billions of people. And I don't know if they're all going to go through the Emotion Life Lab. Maybe they're going to find other routes to get to this. But I view us as not just here to sell our product, but also evangelists for this kind of learning. And again, meet people where they're at. Whatever will help them. But the key is that it's not about just awareness, knowing about it. Knowing about diabetes doesn't get rid of diabetes. We've got to really find ways to help people gain these skills. I mean, can you imagine, CK, what your life would be like, and life around you, and what my life would be like if everybody you interacted with knew about their emotional life and were working to make it add value, not just to their life, but to everyone's life. I mean, this is not an individual pursuit. If a parent can manage their emotional life, what happens for those kids? If a manager, I could share great, Mark's done great studies on the impact of a manager's emotional intelligence on their team. Everything is impacted. How much they show up for work, how passionate they are about work, how good their decisions are, everything. So this is a worldwide effect. And so the dream is to help do that. I mean, it's great that we learn trigonometry and chemical compounds and how to write a thesis statement and all that stuff. That's great. But what if we actually understood our emotions and could put them to work?
Yeah, for sure.
That's the goal.
For those people who want to follow up with Oji Lab and on what you're up to, where should we send them?
Yeah, I think go to our website, ojlifelab.com. Oji, it's not original gangster, it's OG, OJI. I'm so old, I didn't know OG meant original gangster until we trademarked it and people told me how cool our name was. So Oji Life Lab's a great place to go. And we're not super active on social media, but we do post there. And a great way to get, if you want to study, Mark's book, Permission to Feel, is fantastic. And kind of an easy route in is, to get on our mailing list and start sitting in on some of our webinars. We haven't planned out the New Year's schedule, but we usually do them twice a month. And we usually have, PhD psychologists on. I think our next one's going to be about goal setting and creativity. And we'll have a really great researcher from Yale on. So that's a great way to kind of get mixed up in it.
Beautiful. Hey, Matt, I want to just take a moment to really acknowledge you. Thank you for sharing your wisdom of going through the cycles of being a serial entrepreneur. I think a lot of people, especially young entrepreneurs who are going through this their first time, thinks about the dream of, selling to large companies and having an exit and all that stuff. So really appreciate you sharing your journey about, what actually, it is and what it took to transition from being the top dog in Microsoft to being back home again and now coming out to stand for the mission that you now found. I really appreciate you going through the details of, how you come about solving this particular issue. Ultimately, emotion is something that all human beings have. And
Right.
then I think not teaching the skill necessarily to master it, then they master us, right? So helping us master it, making better decisions, tapping into high creativities, and really being better human beings towards everyone around them. Super important mission. So thank you for just doing that. One of my dreams was, this podcast is all about sovereignty.
Mm-hmm.
Mastering our thoughts, mastering our emotions. These are all critical skills to have. So really appreciate you being here and sharing what you guys are doing as a way to help people at work to do that better.
Well, listen, it's fun. I said my goal was for us to get to know each other, and I feel like today was a down payment. So it's a first step. I really appreciate it. And I love what you're doing with Noble Warrior and helping people move down this path. And I feel like doing it with balance. It's not the goal is how can we have a rich life? And that's not measured in dollars. Dollars are nice, but it ain't the answer. And I know you honor that and are doing that every day. So thank you.
Beautiful, Mark. Matt, so I would love to have you on the show again as we learn more about you guys have new updates. So come back again.
Well, let's stay in touch, man.